This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, most emerging market stocks rose today, tracking Wall Street's Friday rally. We saw MSCI's index of emerging market stocks ticking up to a near two-week high. Of course, investors' focus this week will be on the upcoming deadline on further U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. South Africa's JSE All Share started the week on a positive note. We saw gold miners down almost 1%, while, of course, resources climbed today. Now, also coming up on the show, South Africa's passenger rail agency is placed under administration. France braces for more protests against pension reforms. And the Dubai International Airport plans to ban plastics come January 2020. Well, let's start off today's show in South Africa. The country's transport ministry has placed its passenger rail agency under administration with immediate effect. Now, the government has also dissolved the interim board of the state-owned firm. The managing director and founder of transport company Safiri has been appointed as the administrator of PRASA. Well, let's get the latest on this. We're joined now by Angelo Coppola. He is in Johannesburg. Angelo, great to have you, as always. Now, yet another state-owned enterprise struggling financially, plagued with allegations of corruption. Give us a rundown, Angelo, of the factors that led to PRASA's declining performance and certainly the decision to put it under administration.
Well, look, Minister Bulula actually tracked back the problems to the 2015-2016 financial year when he was explaining his decision earlier today during a press briefing. That year, the Auditor General's office actually flagged and highlighted some serious governance issues and breaches and irregular expenditure at the PRASA agency, valued at around $1 billion. In the years subsequent to that, that figure actually climbed to $1.8 billion. There was also that whole debacle or saga around the trains that were manufactured for PRASA by a Spanish rail and locomotive manufacturer that happened to be too tall for the South African railway lines. And some $180 million was paid to a local black economic empowerment operation without any rail experience, who then subcontracted the job out to that Spanish outfit to build those units. At that point, there were some 39 cases that had been sent to the Hawks for further investigation and possible criminal prosecution. We don't know where those are standing at the moment. And those were related to what happened with the railways, those big railway lines, or railway carriages, in fact, and also other governance failures. So it's a hot, steamy mess. And then, of course, the Auditor General just recently found that there was a lack of evidence and also supporting documentation to actually justify hundreds of millions of dollars worth of expenditure and, just as importantly, collections, which the PRASA agency relies on. And then the interim board wasn't able to stabilize the SOE, so Mbalula stepped in and basically fired everybody.
Well, Angelo, the sector is actually facing some challenges as well. Just looking at the stats, rail traffic in the country fell by over 20% in the fiscal year ending in March. Passenger revenues also falling by nearly 50% in 5 years. And apparently only a quarter of PRASA's performance targets were met in the recent past financial year. So what is the outlook for the firm and the sector as a whole?
Well, look, the public transport sector isn't really under that much duress or pressure. PRASA is the main issue here, and yet the public transport system is used by most of the country's population, which is 52 odd million people. Other public transport modes are overloaded. The bus and taxi services are more flexible and are not timetable driven. There also have been a spate of arson attacks on the metro rail services that have commuters obviously very worried about their own safety and security. And most recently, of course, you'll recall that trains were torched in the Cape Town Central train station that brought that entire network to a complete standstill. So people are using other modes of transport, public transport that is, which are more expensive but are more reliable and relatively safer. That's until the security is brought under control on the rail service, the metro rail service, that commuters will then feel a little bit more secure again and then start using it. As it is now, trains will be a second choice to those who can afford the alternative, Uche.
Well, Angelo, in terms of the outlook of the company, the president pretty much stressed that he won't let any of these state-owned enterprises fail. Now, in light of all this, is there any talk of a financial bailout for PRASA or maybe protection from its creditors?
Well, look, the company isn't in good shape financially. The administration step that was taken is a first step to protect that state-owned entity from likely creditors, and that's despite the fact that the PRASA commuter service, Metro Rail, moves around 2.5 million passengers every single day. The problem is that they aren't collecting nearly a quarter of the amount of fares compared to the commuters that are using that service. People are boarding trains illegally, and obviously there aren't any collections that are happening. So a bailout, of course, doesn't seem likely, firstly because there isn't much left in the Treasury pot to fund that currently, what with the odd 280 million bailout that was given to SAA last week. Also, there's a very strong possibility that tax revenues are going to be a lot lower next year than they expected, and of course any appropriation is unlikely based on the fact that there'll be low tax collections. So the administrator has a very big job to do, and whether he's allowed to succeed or operate or not depends on whether the shareholder, that's the state, allows him to do what he needs to do. We're going to have to see how this one plays out in the next couple of months or so, Uche.
All right. Well, we'll certainly be watching. Many thanks, Angelo, for that insight. Of course, Angelo Coppola joining us in Johannesburg. Well, let's head to Tanzania now. The country's liquefied natural gas project has been put on hold. This, of course, follows the suspension of talks between the government and foreign investors who were seeking to review the sharing agreements. Well, CGTN's Daniel Kijo sat down with project manager Felix Nangunka to learn more about the project.
So tell us a bit about Tanzania's LNG history, a bit about the project.
Exploration is already done, and it's already confirmed that there is enough gas to amount to this project. But what we are doing now is to focus on how are we going to develop that gas. And the process of development, we are now starting to the negotiation between government and these companies. And these negotiations are aimed to ascertain all issues pertaining to the legal, commercial, and the technical part of the.
Tell me a bit about the international partners that Tanzania is working with to now maximize on the gas reserves that have been found.
We have discovered gas from Block 1, Block 2, and Block 4. Block 1 and Block 4 is being operated by the Shell from Dutch, with their partner Ophir and the Pavilion Energy. And the Block 2 is being operated by Equinor from Norway, with their partner ExxonMobil from US.
We know that there have been a suspension of talks between Tanzania and some of these global investors. Why has there been suspensions?
It's not that we want to hold anything, but everything is done for good purpose, for good intention, to make sure that countries recoup whatever it can take for benefit of all Tanzanians.
What is Tanzania's area of focus or concern with regards to now these negotiations? What is Tanzania's interest in this?
Our interest, first, to make sure that we are maximizing whatever it takes we're maximizing the revenue. Countries benefit from participation in the project. Tax are collected as it's supposed to be, or is governed as our existing laws.
We know this is perhaps the biggest project for Tanzania in history. What could it mean for Tanzania if this project goes well and LNG is explored and shared and sold, what can happen?
It provides energy through the domestic. I showed the package of the project. Also revenue, it's a source of revenue. Local participation, revenues grow through the direct sale or through local participation. Revenue, also our seat or our infrastructure will grow along with this project.
And now a look at some other corporate headlines today. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says South African Airlines had to be placed under business rescue. In his latest letter to the nation, Ramaphosa argues that there were no other viable and financially workable options in order to secure a credible future for the struggling state carrier. Last week, Ramaphosa ordered SAA to seek a business rescue as the airline is close to collapse. And shares of Tullow Oil dropped 53% following the exit of the energy company's CEO, Paul McDade. Now, the firm also scrapped its dividends after failing to meet its production targets, and that's due to the weak performance by flagship assets in Ghana. Nigeria has filed a new lawsuit against British firm Process and Industrial Development, which is based on new evidence. This comes after the government paid out a bank guarantee of about $200 million to secure the stay of execution on asset seizures of an estimated $9 billion. The case aims to overturn the tribunal order, which directed Nigeria to pay $6.6 billion in damages in 2013. And shares in Tesco rose 6% after the firm announced it was reviewing its operations in Thailand and Malaysia. Now, the British firm's Asian operations are pegged to be worth $9 billion. Tesco has received interest in its units, which generate an estimated 10% of its profits. And that's a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let's head into a quick break now. Still to come. We'll be taking a look at the risks that could affect doing business worldwide next year. And we'll tell you how this entrepreneur has made history in Ghana's energy sector.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN. Welcome back. Now, global risk consultants, Control Risks, have released the latest Risk Map report, which focuses on annual forecasts of political and security risks worldwide. Now, the first risk is U.S. geopolitics, with a drama surrounding political campaigns likely to heavily influence the risk landscape for businesses. The second is the judgment from civil society that expects businesses to be receptive to social values, employees, as well as community interests. The third one is the rise of cyber warfare, which has seen assault on critical infrastructure and global connectivity. After that comes global economic growth that analysts predict will be dismally low. This, of course, will in turn affect the cost of inaction due to high political instability. And lastly, strategic leadership, under which experts believe businesses need to adopt strategies that resonate with an intensely tactical world. Well, of course, we'll put that all together for you. And to paint a clear picture of what exactly are the risks that lie ahead for Africa's investment landscape, especially, we're joined by Control Risk East Africa specialist. Her name is Patricia Rodriguez. Great to have you with us on the show, Patricia.
Thank you for having me.
And now, looking at your report, you said you expect a tougher set of challenges in 2020 than we've seen to date. Now, a lot of that involves the relationship between politics and economics going forward. Give us a sense of what risk and opportunity as well does this pose for Africa as a continent going forward?
Sure. So one of the things that we've highlighted is this growing link between political and economic affairs, especially on the side of Western actors and more bigger geopolitical actors. So in Africa, this translates into a number of things. On one hand, it can be quite risky to do business. We are starting to see Western actors, for example, using economic sanctions as a tool. And on top of that, we also have growing populism within Western communities, which can translate into some very difficult business environments for African companies that are looking to export to some of these markets, which are increasingly prioritizing their own businesses. So on one hand, there are these risks for people who are looking to export. On the other hand, it can actually be a boon for the African investment landscape. So with all this geopolitical competition, you're actually starting to see competition in terms of investment flows. So if we look at the Horn of Africa, for example, we are not only seeing interest from Western actors, we are also seeing China playing a very big role, as well as countries from the Middle East. So it's a bit of both, really.
Now, you mentioned populism, protectionism, sanctions as well. Those are some of the major obstacles that, of course, businesses will be facing as they try to navigate global markets and supply chains. How do you think the recently signed Africa Continental Free Trade Area will feature in all of this?
So I think that's a really positive story for Africa. So while we're seeing, I suppose, the closing up of some of these economies elsewhere, Africa is seeming to move towards a more open, a more integrated economy as a continent. So it's a really positive story. But I think we need to temper this optimism with a heavy dose of realism. So while we're seeing countries signing up to these agreements, we're also seeing countries that are a bit more hesitant to engage with them. So Nigeria is a very good example, because while it has recently ratified some of these protocols, it has also closed its borders with some of its neighbors. So we are seeing at least the political sentiment, the political will, but when it comes to implementation, I think this is where Africa still has a long way to go.
All right. Now, you also point to technology and data as greatly changing the way we do business going forward. Give us a sense of what role you think they will play in terms of risk and reward going forward.
Okay, so in the African continent, I think technology is a very important facilitator of economic growth. I like to point to Ethiopia, where we're starting to see the telecoms market being opened up to foreign investment. If you think about the potential economic opportunity there, it's pretty large. We have a population of over 100 million people who, with better access to telecoms, will be able to be more integrated not only in the global economy, but will also have access to things like financial services, which has been a problem in places like Ethiopia. But we also do have to be cognizant of some of the risks involved. We are increasingly starting to see, larger geopolitical players with the ability to conduct potentially harmful attacks against different players in the cyberspace. We also have rising regulation. In Kenya, we've just recently passed data protection laws, for example. So it's a bit difficult for companies to try and navigate these two potential fronts where you have cyber being linked to geopolitical concerns, but also governments who are increasingly trying to regulate and legislate around some of the technology space.
Right. Now, an interesting part of your report is you say despite a somewhat gloomy outlook on a number of fronts, many of your clients remain set for growth in the months ahead. That seems like a cautiously optimistic outlook. How so? Give a sense of how so.
I think the best companies will always be prepared for whatever comes their way. So it's all about having an understanding of the environment you're operating in, both domestic and global, putting in place internal protocols that enable you to respond to whatever geopolitical or economic crisis, and then being actually able to implement them when the time comes. So it's in sum, it's all about preparation.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us in this studio. Thank you for your insights. Of course, that was Patricia Rodriguez. She is a Control Risk East Africa specialist. Well, let's move on now. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta says that the African, Caribbean and Pacific group of nations will strongly defend multilateral trading systems in order to protect themselves from unfair trade practices. Kenyatta added that Kenya, which has taken over the chairmanship of the group of 79 countries, will spearhead reforms and focus on reinvigorating the ACP for the next 3 years. Now, under his stewardship, Kenya will seek to promote and protect the interests of the group at the regional, continental and international levels. The Kenyan president also urged ACP countries to embrace innovation and technology in order to boost their economies.
This revised agreement will reinvigorate our group, giving us more dynamism, vision, fresh impetus and drive, while at the same time helping to galvanize the modernization of the ACP group.
And heading to Ethiopia now, the country has announced that it will not open its banking sector to private players. A new investment policy showed that the banking and aviation sectors will only be run by locals or in partnership with the state. Here's CGTN's Girum Chala with more.
Since Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to power, Ethiopia's economic reform has been high on his priority list. And just recently, a new investment policy has been adopted by the Council of Ministers. This policy, unlike expectations of many, however, reserves the banking and insurance sectors only for locals. But why?
From the discussion that we've had, from the research that we have done, we have not come to a conclusion that the liberalization of the financial sector at this point in time is a right course of action that needs to be taken. And hence, we have reserved the financial sector for Ethiopian nationals, but a reform has also been added to this element where Ethiopian diasporas can actually now invest in the financial sector.
The aviation industry is similarly left for locals.
Currently, domestic investors can actually invest in the aviation industry, but for foreigners, it's only allowed in joint venture with the government. So basically means when Ethiopian Airlines is ready for a joint venture arrangement, the government can make a change to the, can decide to form such arrangement.
Initially, and hoping the finance and aviation sectors will open up the space, has generated lots of interest from regional and international banks. The Investment Commissioner Abeba Abebayo says Ethiopia needs a time before it deeply involves foreign investors in its most lucrative sectors.
It's the question of, answering that fundamental question. Is our economy ready to absorb and this competition that's going to come from foreign banks, number one. Number two, will allowing foreign banks and foreigners in this industry help the agenda of sustaining the growth of the Ethiopian economy? If that's answered in the affirmative, I think it's only a matter of time before the liberalization of this sector.
But there is a good news for investors who would like to put their money in other business environments of the country. Addis Ababa is putting together what will become one of the finest investment incentive proclamations.
Certain types of incentives that have been in the past abused without serving any particular policy objectives will be rationalized, and any loopholes that made it difficult for investors to benefit from the existing regime will also be addressed through this investment regulation. So it's about streamlining the incentives, it's about rationalizing the incentives, it's about also making it extremely transparent and predictable for investors to be able to make use of the incentives that the country provides.
The new Ethiopian investment policy is expected to attract many more foreign investors. So far, the country has been on average garnering an investment worth about $4.5 billion yearly over the past few years. Now, Ethiopia hopes that number could exceed $5 billion of investment. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, Ghanaian entrepreneur Kevin Okere is making history. He found oil in deep water last month, becoming the first independent African energy group to do so. Here's CGTN's Alexandria Majala with his story.
If you ask Forbes, Springfield Oil Group CEO Kevin Okere is one of Ghana's savviest yet understated entrepreneurs. Although he was born into a wealthy family, he displayed an entrepreneurial spirit from a young age.
I used to sell water at a sports stadium at a very young age, at the age of 10, 11, thereabout. I believe that whatever you're doing, just put your all into it and do your all, and you'll be able to achieve whatever your main objectives are. Don't look down to any opportunity.
The Financial Times announced last month that Springfield had struck oil in the deep waters of Takoradi, making it the first African energy group to explore and find oil in deep water. Okere's oil exploration enterprise made 2 discoveries totaling 1.2 billion barrels of crude oil off the coast of Ghana, in a block that would be bigger than the country's current largest, the Jubilee block. The Jubilee field is operated by UK's Tullow Oil and is one of Africa's largest recent finds. If confirmed, Springfield's new discovery could significantly boost production in the West African country. Even though his path to owning the oil block was peppered with challenges, his patience prevailed.
Now, on an average, it takes companies maybe 12 months or so to be able to acquire an asset, but it took us 4 years. But we never stopped. It was very difficult, it was very challenging, but we never stopped because we had a goal that we needed to get to. So in 4 years' time, in 2016, we finally got this asset, this oil block. And then we've been working at it ever since then by, first of all, bringing, at that point in 2017, it was the biggest seismic vessel in the world called a Ramfor Titan, to shoot a 3D broadband survey, just to help us really assess the opportunities that were ahead of us.
The Ghanaian government is looking to more than double overall crude oil production over the next 4 years. The country expects to be producing 250,000 barrels of oil a day by next year, which would make it the 4th largest producer in sub-Saharan Africa. Businessmen like Okere may very well make that possible.
Springfield's next target, obviously, is to reach first oil, to start producing the hydrocarbons that we found. And the good part about this, or what actually gets us going, is the fact that this will enable Springfield to invest more in our community investment projects by touching more lives in Ghana and on the continent. And also, in addition, it would enable the Ghana government to also increase their social intervention project that they use these proceeds for.
Although it's about 11 years old, the 38-year-old's company recently ventured into the upstream sector of the oil and gas industry. It was awarded its pioneer oil and gas asset by the government of Ghana in 2016 as the operator and majority interest holder in West Cape 3-Point Block offshore. Okere is now preparing to make the announcement of the new oil find with members of President Nana Akufo-Addo's government. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Now, Tunisia's first satellite, Challenge 1, is an ambitious project by the country's engineering and technology consulting company, Telnet. The satellite will be launched in July 2020 from south-central Kazakhstan. And CGTN's Adnan Shaushi brings us the latest.
Mohamed Frikha is the founder and CEO of Telnet. He says Challenge 1 is a scientific research and technology demonstrator satellite offering new concepts in information technologies and their practical applications.
This nanosatellite will be specialized in IoT by space, Internet of Things by space. The first launch of this satellite would be used to certify this technology.
Mohamed Frikha added that the satellite cost about $350,000, while its global counterpart cost about $1.7 million.
Now we are ready to launch our first Tunisian nanosatellite in July 2020. And this is an historical moment for our country.
Tunisian engineers and competencies in different fields are behind Telnet's success story. They have led the in-house development of the project.
Telnet has a long experience in IoT and embedded programming. We've used this expertise and competence to enter the challenging domain of aerospace technology.
Telnet signed a contract with the Russian operator of commercial launches of Soyuz 2 rockets, GK Launch Services, for putting in space the North African country's first satellite. Experts say Challenge 1 in orbit operation will serve as a precursor mission for a constellation of 30 satellites. Telnet Group has signed a tripartite deal with 2 Russian companies for the launch of the 30-satellite constellation by 2023 for the development of a network of Internet of Things, IoT applications. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break now, still coming up on the show. France is gearing up for more protests against pension reforms. And Singapore introduces new regulations restricting the use of e-scooters.
Again, he can holding guns. Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
And
Nampiri na Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, here's a recap of tonight's top headlines. Nairobi's governor pled not guilty to corruption and other economic crimes involving millions of dollars in a Kenyan court on Monday. Governor Mike Mbuvi Sonko is accused of conspiracy to commit corruption, failure to comply with laws related to procurement, unlawful acquisition of public property, and laundering the proceeds of a crime, as well as the misappropriation of about $3.5 million. And Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he will not interact with the media during his trip to Norway to receive the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. The move has sparked controversy with the Norwegian Nobel Committee. Abiy Ahmed will not be the first to refuse to talk to the media as he receives his award. In 2009, Barack Obama, the then president of the US, made the same decision. And South African Zozibini Tunzi has been crowned Miss Universe 2019. The 26-year-old beauty queen beat 90 other contestants on Sunday during the pageant, which was held in Atlanta. Now, Tunzi is the third South African to win the title. The 2019 Miss Universe is known as a passionate activist engaged in the fight against gender-based violence. Miss Puerto Rico Madison Anderson was the first runner-up, while Miss Mexico Sofia Aragon was the second runner-up. And that's a recap of today's top headlines. Now, on the international front, France is bracing for another week of protests with neither the government nor demonstrators showing any sign of backing down. The government will announce the final details of its controversial pension reform plan on Wednesday. CGTN's correspondent Stéphane De Vries brings us more.
Ahead of the second week of the French transport strike, this Sunday newspaper sums it up best. Who is going to give in? Neither side is willing to budge, and the government has repeated that it will stick to the pension reforms that sparked the protests. The leader of the CGT, one of the country's largest unions, was also crystal clear. We will carry on until the withdrawal of the reforms. Faced with an aging population, many European countries have changed their reform systems over the years. The French government now says that it has no other option than a complete overhaul. It will announce the exact plans on Wednesday. For President Emmanuel Macron, the stakes are high. He was elected on an ambitious reform agenda. But now, halfway through his first mandate, he is struggling to reach his goals. President Macron is facing one of the biggest tests of his presidency. There will be another National Day of Action on Tuesday, and unions are already planning a third one for Thursday. Many sectors now start to feel the economic impacts of the strikes, while commuters are bracing for again another week of travel chaos. Stéphane De Vries, CGTN, Paris.
Now, analysts say that France will be paralyzed until Christmas as more and more unions across the country plan unlimited strikes. All public transport services in Paris, including Le Metro, the bus and tram, were badly hit as both SNCF and Eurostar suspended bookings. Now, bus services across France will also be affected as drivers strike. With the involvement of haulage unions, the possibility of road blockages continues to rise. Around 20% of flights have been cancelled due to the strike by ground crew, and many parents will also be forced to stay home as teachers and teaching assistants also go on strike. Letters will be delayed as postal workers strike too. Well, still in Paris, commuters are having a hard time as a result of these strikes, but they're not all against the ongoing protests. Take a listen.
I just don't understand. It's not the right way to do things for the Paris public transport system to block people like this. It's not acceptable. It will turn against themselves. We can't go to work. We lose a whole day. It's not normal. It wasn't too bad. I waited for 15 minutes. It was okay for Line L. The service is decent. There are more people today. I think that people have anticipated such things.
I support the strikers for sure, even if that means making other arrangements. I'm with them. I agree with the strike.
I'm not against the strike, but I can't quite understand what they are asking for. I think that's quite a heavy strike, which results in paralyzing a large portion of Paris, and I think it's all a bit complicated.
Well, let's move on now. A conference has been held in Beijing detailing achievements of Chinese companies who are involved in the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, the event was not only a means of sharing their achievements, but also discussing ways to improve trade along the modern-day Silk Road.
Two Chinese organizations, the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade and the All-China Federation of Industry and Commerce, as well as the New York-based World Trade Centers Association, co-hosted a forum detailing Chinese involvement in the Belt and Road Initiative. The forum is the first of its kind, summarizing achievements and experiences of Chinese public sector companies taking part in the BRI.
It's common when a country's economy develops that the businesses from there will go abroad. US, Germany, Japan, South Korea, and many others all experience such a process. China is now at this stage. On one hand, we have a prosperous economy and a successful development model that has been praised by many countries. On the other hand, we are facing a new economic era with much trade conflict. With this backdrop, our companies are in urgent need to explore new markets abroad. The Belt and Road Initiative has opened a new era in which Chinese companies can go overseas.
According to Liu Yong, chief economist and dean of the China Development Bank, as of this year there are over 3,600 listed Chinese companies, with a market value of around 54 trillion yuan. Around one-fourth of these companies are taking part in and have contributed to the Belt and Road Initiative.
For the past 6 years, the total trade volume between China and countries along the Belt and Road was over $7.5 trillion. In the first 10 months of 2019, the trade grew 9.4% year-on-year and is far more than trade with other countries and regions. The total investment to BRI countries from Chinese public companies and other organizations has exceeded $100 billion.
The conference has also released a guide on the business environment of foreign countries and a book named Best Practice of Chinese-listed companies building the Belt and Road. The goal of these documents is to enable better understanding of overseas investment environments and business regulations, to promote investment and collaboration between Chinese companies and their counterparts in BRI countries, and to help Chinese companies better engage with local communities. Vincent Vinci, CGTN, Beijing.
Now, e-scooters are becoming increasingly popular in many European and American cities, and that has a lot to do with their convenience, their speed, and their lightweight. So much so, they're now overtaking many more traditional forms of city transport. Yet despite their popularity, e-scooters are illegal in many countries, and they're causing widespread accidents and worries over safety. Well, in Singapore, new regulations have just been introduced to restrict their use. CGTN's Mirolu with more.
Although hailed as an environmentally friendly solution to last-mile journeys, e-scooters, one type of personal mobility devices, or PMDs as they're being called here in Singapore, caused a headache for local lawmakers after many pedestrians complained about dangerous riding. In November, the Singapore government banned PMDs on all pedestrian footpaths. From next year, a zero-tolerance approach will be taken. These caught flouting the ban will face fines of up to 2,000 Singapore dollars and or imprisonment of up to 3 months.
When PMDs came, suddenly there was this motorized vehicle on the footpath, which I think pedestrians were not prepared for. And therefore, some issues arose, and the main thing was safety. And some of these were being used in reckless manner. They were being modified to bigger size, and they were speeding.
The Active Mobility Panel is made up of different interest groups representing pedestrian, cyclist, and e-scooter communities. The panel recommends actions to the government to improve the safety of pedestrians as well as active mobility device users.
I do not feel that the government is looking at totally eliminating this device. In fact, until today, they are still encouraging it, coming up with the regulations, coming up with ways to try to make this work.
Since banning PMDs from footpaths across the city, the government has stepped up efforts to expand the cycling path from 440 kilometers to 750 kilometers in the next 5 years and triple the cycling network by 2030. They have also created a $50 million fund to improve infrastructure, such as widening footpaths to accommodate both PMDs and pedestrians.
On December the 4th, the Singapore government announced that it had accepted all the recommendations by the Active Mobility Advisory Panel, most notably mandating all e-scooter riders must pass a theory test and imposing a minimum age of 16 years old for anyone who wishes to ride an e-scooter, and ordering businesses to provide third-party insurance for people who ride for work.
Perhaps the group of PMD users most affected by the overnight ban are food delivery riders who rely on e-scooters for their livelihood. The government and the 3 major food delivery companies have set up a $7 million e-scooter trade-in grant to provide funding assistance. However, for those who still wish to use PMDs to make deliveries, their journey times are being extended and wages are going down.
Since after November the 5th, when they implement the law of pathway ban, it's at least cut about 30 to 40% of my income before the implement, because we have to walk along, we have to dismount and we have to push the bike to the estate.
With errant riders being under stricter control thanks to the new rules, pedestrians should feel safer walking the streets, and e-scooter users might be able to shake off their bad image. This will hopefully pave the way for walkers and riders to coexist peacefully. Mirolu, CGTN, Singapore.
And shifting focus now, let's take a look at commodities today. Oil prices fell after data showed that Chinese exports declined for a fourth straight month. That, of course, has sent jitters throughout the market. There is some concern that there is damage being done to global demand by the trade war between Washington and Beijing. Meanwhile, gold prices steady today as investors await cues from the U.S. Fed on interest rates later this week. They are also sizing up the chances of a new round of U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods. Well, let's take a short break now. Still to come. Dubai International Airports plan to ban plastics come January 2020. And Tunisian brands are strutting their designs at one of the country's most prestigious fashion shows.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Now, Dubai's international airports are some of the busiest airports in the world, with nearly 90 million passengers passing through DXB and DWC every year. As a result, the airports produce millions of tons of plastic waste. But a new initiative is set to change your travel experience and in turn have a positive global impact on the environment. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with more.
Change is coming to the world of air travel.
Dubai International Airport is the biggest airport in the world for international traffic, and together with our partners we've decided to ban single-use plastics from the 1st of January 2020.
That may seem like a tall order, however, the process of achieving it has already begun. 29 metric tons of plastic waste are being recycled from the security checkpoints so far this year. That's an average of 11,000 bottles per day. Dubai Airports has been working closely with more than 250 of its concession and hospitality partners to fulfill the promise.
95% of our partners have actually made the pledge to switch from plastic to appropriate and relevant substitutes for some of the products that are used in catering and retail across the airport.
Notable amongst them is Costa Coffee, which has committed to replacing its plastic-lined cups with a 100% renewable plant-based smart cup. Pret a Manger, McDonald's and Giraffe are also on board by replacing a total of nearly 6 million items with recyclable materials.
We see 89 million people using our airport every year, and that's 89 million customers, and the majority of them are global customers coming through Dubai International Airport. And one of our intentions here is to build awareness, to change behavior, and to also change behavior, I believe, in managing businesses as well. And this is very much the early stages of a long journey, I believe, to have a more environmentally friendly approach to managing businesses, particularly airports.
However, the plastic-free initiative presents a huge logistical challenge to the airport's management team and to every business in their supply chain.
The major challenges for launching a plastic-free initiatives are cost. There will be a 20% increase in direct costs from switching to plastic-free. Suppliers, while many suppliers are working on it, a lot of them have not found viable alternatives. We need those in the water and soft drink industries to push this initiative forward. And recycling. We as an industry need to identify more sustainable recycling solutions.
Pressure is growing for corporations and individuals to act more responsibly and adopt more sustainable practices to fight against plastic pollution and preserve marine life. The Dubai airport's ban could soon become a template for other major transportation hubs and organizations around the world to follow suit. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Now, an exhibition showcasing made in Tunisia designs continues across the country until the end of this year. The event is organized by the Agency for the Promotion of Industry and Innovation.
The event welcomed more than 150 exhibitors. A fashion show presented the latest trends in a bid to boost the textile and clothing and leather footwear industry.
This event is a concrete expression of the public-private partnership aimed at promoting made in Tunisia and strengthening the recovery of the textile, clothing, leather and footwear sectors.
The president of the National Federation of Leather and Footwear stressed the need for Tunisian consumers to change their mindset and opt for Tunisian products.
The quality of local products is equal to or better than that of products from some countries in terms of compliance with safety and health standards and competitiveness, unlike uncertified products sold on the parallel market.
Authorities say the value of exports in the textile clothing sector has risen by 6.7% in the first 10 months of 2018. Exports in the leather and footwear sector grew by 11% in the first 10 months of the same year.
The textile, clothing and leather footwear sectors account for 36% in terms of production units and jobs in manufacturing industries. The business faced difficulties in recent years, but now it's booming.
The textile and clothing sector is boosting exports. 83% of the 1,604 production units are totally exporting their production. They represent 56% of all exporting companies based in Tunisia. The national strategy for the development of these vital sectors for the period 2019-2023 provides for the creation of 10,000 jobs annually, while increasing the value of exports from $2.6 to $4.4 billion. Adon Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, before we go, let's check in on Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand, little changed as, of course, investors await key market-moving events expected in the week ahead. Meanwhile, Kenya's shilling firming up against the dollar. It was supported by tightening liquidity in the local money market, as well as inflows from diaspora remittances. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.